What's your story? So in marketing stories, what stories do you tell? When do you tell them? To whom? And how? That's what I thought we'd explore today. So who do you tell your story to? Well, there's two sets of people, unless you can tell me some more on that. Well, there is a third, but I'll cover that at the end. But for at this stage, there's two areas. That's Rod. Stories that you tell to. And one is your audience, and the other one is your marketing or referral partners. How are you engaging with your referral partners on your other networking meetings when you do your one-to-ones? What stories are you telling them? What stories are you teasing out of them? We're going to be doing that in the breakout sessions. So how do we tell stories? Well, you can tell stories to one person, casual conversation over a coffee, one-to-one after a networking meeting, or you can tell a story in a presentation, a sales presentation, a presentation about your business, your product or service. You could also tell stories to many. So when you give your 1-minute presentation at a networking meeting, are you using and including stories? Do you have the confidence and experience of doing a seminar or online a webinar? That's a great way to tell stories, include stories to many. Do you tell stories and use video to tell stories? Do you record those stories? Obviously, you'd have to do those live to begin with. Do you do them live on a Facebook Live, etc.? Or do you just present, or do you weave the stories in there? Do you share recorded stories? We tell stories on FaceTime, so it's very, very, we've all got the ability to do this if we get over our fear. More of that later. Could we tell stories by audio? A lot of people, podcasting is extremely popular. And the reason it's extremely popular is because you listen to it when you're doing other things. You don't have to watch, you don't have to sit in one place. I have podcasts on when I'm driving. People have other people's stories by audio if they put the radio on. I prefer podcasts. Or do you tell stories in the written word on blog? And I know Anne-Marie's excellent at this. She does this on LinkedIn all the time. Some really compelling stories. So if you feel comfortable and you naturally communicate person to person, you'll naturally choose something out of that particular slide. I particularly like video. I'm very comfortable on video. And of course, on those videos, I can pull the audio off and turn it into a podcast. I also can get transcripts of my videos or audios that are automatically turned into the written word. And so you can really multitask if you really think about how you can get a lot done. And I know most of us on here are probably working on our own. So we need to be savvy on those things to get more done without spending all the hours God sends. So where can we tell these stories? Well, the first place is on your website. The challenge is that in most cases, the only area you see it, if you're lucky, is, and Andrew and Ewan would tell us this, but the only places a lot of people tell stories is the about section. And I don't know whether it's even a story, but that's a great place to start. But do we include stories in the other areas? Or do we just talk about what we do and sound like everybody else that does what we do? What pages could we use stories on? Well, if you want undivided attention, so you're not distracted by the banners on the side and the different pages, can't think of the name of it now, but on the top, then you would go to have a landing page. And for those that are not familiar with that, a landing page is just one page within your website where there's no other distractions and there's no links to other pages. In other words, you've communicated with somebody by voice or by a link, and you just want them to go to one page. And of course, a story can be on there. And I'm going to show you an example of one now. But also, you can have stories within, if that landing page then takes them on a sales funnel or a continuity story, i.e. takes them to the next page and then the next page, then you could be telling stories along those lines. Where would you tell your stories in this? And this, by the way, is the pipeline. It's the pipeline that you're going to go through whatever business you've got. If you're in front of an audience, you've got to grab their attention and get them to lean in so they become and engage with them so they're a lead. So where would you tell your stories? You've got a lead, you've got to connect with them, speak with them. You've got to
do it every stage, Paul.
Sorry?
You probably did it at every stage, couldn't you?
You probably
in
could,
some form or another.
Do you want to talk that through?
I just think that if you're talking to a client at any point through either the lead gen process or when you're trying to connect with them or qualify them, you're exploring them, you're sharing something about you, and the whole process you're just building. It might be a very small anecdote or just a very quick reference, but it's still potentially a story, and it brings the conversation to life at every single stage.
Absolutely.
So I'm not suggesting you should have a really long story at every section. It could just be a little micro reference that you pull in that brings what you're talking about to life.
What I want everybody to take from this, and you'll recognize this amongst who you term sales pitches, is if you're in front of, you want to grab if you identify your audience, the trouble is the audience is easily distracted. So you've got to grab their attention in some way. So you may tell a story or imply a story the way I did there with men with belly fat. It's an obvious audience, very easy to spot. But then to tease them in without telling the full story, I've added the word how to lose belly fat and look sexy again. So that was the tease. So when you're trying to attract a lead, and we've talked about it before, we need to get somebody to lean in and be interested. So the type of story that you might develop there won't be the whole story. You know, when you see on Netflix or the cinema and they what do? You go on Netflix or Amazon Prime, you can see a teaser, gives you all the action points, doesn't tell you the whole story, but you think, hey, that sounds, I won't mind watching that. I'll put that on a save. I'll watch that. I did it this weekend. So you've got to think of what teasers you could do for your business. But what you're trying to do is curiosity, not give the whole story. When you've connected, a lot of people skip the qualify bit. They go straight to presentation. I've seen it all the time. In other words, they've got their story and I'm going to give you my story. This is my sales pitch and I give it to everybody. But everybody in your audience has got a different story. There is a different stage in their life, or they've got different sets of problems. So before you tell your story, you've got to find out their story. You've got to that's the qualification. So a different story under qualify. So anybody, any comments on that? Anybody like to contribute to that? Yes, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, just on the getting people's interest, I have a story that I share, not surprisingly, and I don't always say to people, but I ask people if they have heard my toilet brush story or if they know what their toilet brush moment is. And it's a genuine story and it's on my website, but that is normally enough for people to go, she's really loopy and I'm off, or yeah, I need to know what she's talking about. And that's kind of like my, what was it you said, how you kind of catch people's attention?
Well, it's a tease. It's you're getting people to lean in instead of clicking away or moving on. I would think I'd like to know your toilet story.
Well, I'm happy to share it if anyone wants to know my toilet brush story.
Well, you might want to share it in whoever you're partnered
I'll
with.
share it when I go into the yeah.
Yeah. Who else is using stories and how? Who doesn't use it? Who doesn't use any stories? Any stories? I do, but Martin, you don't. Andy, you don't.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you don't.
Oh, no, I definitely do.
Oh, right. All right. So what the stories do you use?
Yeah, I guess it's more about trying to figure out the story that my client wants to tell, which is, and actually it reminded me when you were doing last week about the pictures, and then you showed the messages or concepts that you wanted those pictures to represent. And that's exactly what I try and tease out of my clients, like what do you want these pictures to do, where do you want them to function, what concepts you're trying to get across, especially when I was doing event work, but even more now with like promotional pictures, it's what are you promoting, so you need those concepts.
Yeah
Definitely. And marketing managers will be very good at rattling off what they want, but other people, and I've noticed architects who I'm working more and more with, don't actually have a clue. They just want I just want pretty pictures of the building. But actually they'll look like every other architect.
I think one of the skills that we all need to develop, especially salespeople, we're all salespeople. I shouldn't say that. We're all salespeople. One of the skills we all need to develop is the power of questions. Questions give us answers. They give us feedback. They give us understanding. So if an architect said to me, well, I just want some pictures, I'd want to know why. What is it you want them to achieve? And the branding photographers on here would know that. Andy would know if somebody came in for a particular vehicle. Some people would say, well, you want an Audi, whatever. These are the terms or whatever. But it's a good question to know how do you use the car? Do you use it for business? Do you, have you got children? Have you got dogs? What are your previous cars? Why did you buy those? In other words, I'm sure Andy would intuitively know all those. And I think we all know our stories and we all know what questions to ask. But the mindset is to be really interested rather than interesting. Sorry, Nick, you keep putting your hand up. I did notice it, but Nick.
No, that's fine, Paul. I think, just building on what Rebecca was saying, I think, I often ask my clients what they're hoping to achieve with their photography, and they may give you a little bit of information, but they're probably not used to sharing that. So you do have to really dig into it and explore with them what's the message they want to communicate, what's the story they want to tell, and you've got to get to know them and build that relationship with them before you can, and understand their business really well before you can help them tell their story. Yeah. I think that's what Rebecca was saying. It's that real exploration of a partner or of a business when you're working with them. But then you can then help them, and you can show their transformational stories. So where did they come from, and where did they get to? So there could be a story there around the journey they've been on. There are so many opportunities, I think, to weave stories in at the beginning when you're talking to the client, and at the end of the process when you finish working with them.
The stories illustrate and help you communicate the points you want to make. You'll notice on that Elite Man site that if you scroll down, you see the befores and afters of the 24 men that he took through this particular program. So that in itself is communicating the story in one picture. Later on, there are videos of some of those individuals, and they tell their personal story. So there's another way that you might use stories, testimonials. What we'll do now is to go and do some breakouts. So the way I want you to do this, and I'll give you good time, you're going to need to divide your time up equally. I want you to take a real interest in the other person, right? I want you to, none of us on Marketing Crew ever look to sell to one another, but I want you to take a real interest. Very often on these, when you do one-to-one, somebody just wants to get you there in one place so they can pitch their stuff at you. And that doesn't feel good at all. I used to teach people in BNI, obviously, how to move from networking to developing meaningful referrals. And in the one-to-ones and in the meetings within the meeting, the 1 minute, I always said, tell a story. Illustrate your pitch or your story. And so photographers could show what they were doing. An architect can show drawings. And then your solicitors and your accountants and your bankers would say, well, I can't show anything. I can't show a £5 note. I said, well, you can tell us a story about the type of people you've helped in the last month, how you've managed to help a farmer get funding for a silo for a new project, and you can tell that story. And so if anybody's on networking, other networking events, I know a lot of you are, just tell this story of who you've been dealing with, who you know this week recently. It paints so much of a picture. So it's either something visible you can show or the story. So that's what we want to tease out. So mentally say, I'm going to see how I can help you get more business today, right? So I want you to lean into the person you're talking to, decide who's going first, and I want you to find out their story, find out who they're getting in front of, who their audience is, pick out one or more of the problems that they solve the most, what the issues that their audiences have, and how they uniquely, or as best as uniquely, how they uniquely solve that person's problem, how they move them from A to C. And although all accountants or leasing companies, for instance, as far as Andy's concerned, essentially do the same thing, Andy will do it in a unique way. It'll be from his experience, his background, the fact that he's genuinely interested, whatever. You'll tease that story out. And then what we'll do is to take a few minutes out and think, whoever's with Andy, how am I going to promote Andy to the group? Sorry about that, Mel. I'll just look at the technology. I could see that you'd ended up on your own. Billy Noble.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Right. Let's go. You're helping creative agencies, as I understand it, creative businesses. They could be, creative agencies get the right team together so that they improve so they can get bigger clients, etc. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it also includes marketing, creative, digital, and sales. So it's basically all marketing functions.
So how would I spot these? If I was doing a Google search, obviously I could go for a marketing agency or a digital agency. Any others?
The marketing would be the umbrella sort of terminology, and then the rest would probably fall within it. And
so if you're doing a recruitment and helping them get the right people, it assumes they have a certain number of people in that. Yeah. Because if there's just two of them, it probably wouldn't. Am I right?
They do it themselves. They wouldn't need me to do it, or they do it badly, but they still do it themselves.
So what is a typical size of business?
Well, the company that we talked to about earlier that I've just been appointed by, I've got sort of 118 offices across 25 countries. So they are big, but probably in the UK they've probably got 10 sites.
118 offices over how many countries?
25.
25. And is this an advertising agency?
Well, they wouldn't call themselves an advertising agency. They call themselves a marketing agency.
A marketing agency.
Marketing communications agency.
And are you, this is one you're working with at the moment, are you fulfilling a role in one office, the Bristol office, for instance?
No, I'm fulfilling the roles in the Cirencester office.
So Cirencester. How did you get that client?
They were on my rolling email program of prospects, and I went to them with my offer, and I got a call out the blue saying, we'd like to give you an opportunity to work with us and see how we work together and how you perform.
Who did you deal with? What, I don't mean the name. What's the level?
The HR person.
Is that fairly typical?
It is and it isn't. It is in the size of agency that we're talking about. They would have an HR department, or as they're otherwise known, the business prevention department, and they everything would have to go through them. But then they would bring in what they call a hiring manager, and the hiring manager is likely to be the person who's going to be working with the new candidate that we're fulfilling the role for.
Is that hiring manager within the HR?
No, that would be, say they were recruiting for an account manager. The hiring manager would be the account director, who they would report into on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So HR do the screening and get the people,
Yeah.
and then obviously either the marketing manager or the brand manager that's going to be working with them has got some say in that.
They would be involved in the interviewing process. Yeah,
that's interesting. Why do you? I can answer this anyway. I'm going to ask you the question. Why do you think you provide a better understanding than others, than maybe other recruitment agencies?
Well, I think we covered. So I think it's having 40 years experience in the marketing business, having been sort of managing directors of agencies, and have been part of the hiring process, and I know the pitfalls and the rationale of hiring people. And I think we talked about this again before, and I think that it was a little known fact that 2 in 5 businesses take just 2 weeks to realise they've made the wrong hire. And that is obviously a very costly process to go through again. So our sort of selling point, or one of our stories is about our right first time policy. And our right first time policy means we use all our experience to make sure that the candidates are the right fit. It's not all about experience and expertise. It's about chemistry and fit, and the way that they would be part of the group.
I'm not going to go that route. What I'm going to do is to say, you just said some stats there that it takes so many weeks to realise you've got the wrong person. What was those figures?
It's 2 in 5 businesses take just 2 weeks to discover they've hired the wrong person. So from them walking through the door, it takes 2 weeks to realise they're not meeting their expectations and it's not working out.
Have you had personal experience of that?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've hired somebody when I was at McCann's, and they came across as everything was right at the interview process, and I think again it wasn't down to experience and expertise; it was down to chemistry and fit. They just rubbed people up the wrong way, didn't get on with the team, and thought they knew better, and it was about chemistry. So I immediately got them out.
You were MD at Mechanics, weren't you?
Yeah, in Bristol. I can talk to you a little bit about my story, because my story is based on, it's a story of a journey.
Yeah, by the way, I've just pulled the story out of that. That's why I asked you that question, as you'll see.
Yeah.
Go on, tell us a story.
It's about the end-to-end candidate recruitment journey, and this journey has what I'd call sort of 10 stop off points, and it starts with the client hiring requirement. The client would come to me with a reason for hiring, what they wanted, who they wanted to hire, and that would take them all through to appointment. And within that journey, it's about reviewing the CVs, it's about sourcing candidates, it's about interviews, and it's about feedback to the client, shortlisting, organising contracts, etc.
If I can stop you there, when somebody might ask you what is the process if we work with you, or once you've got the business, you might want to say, well, let me tell you the process that we're going to go through, one or the other. In terms of the conversation, I might be wrong. I don't think it's that important. Unless they bring it up, they ask, but after.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
because if we're not careful, that could then sound like a bit of a bit of a.
They're not really interested in that too much. They're interested in the end result. It's on the website. They can see it.
So, but I like that story. Remember we talked recently about revealing your vulnerability whilst being able to point out the issues and finding out the issues they've got. So obviously you'd find out with somebody how they hired people in the past. Have they all gone well? Have you ever found, and then you tell your story. I know when I was MD at McCann Erickson in Bristol, I hired somebody I thought was great. He looked good on the day. He scrubbed up well. But 2 weeks in, we realized that as an issue, there was no chemistry. The chemistry that he showed at the interview with me wasn't shown with his colleagues, etc. Big mistake. In actual fact, 40% of, blah, blah, blah. Are there any particular, you're very busy at the moment, but if I was to ask the group of specifically either a target business or that you're trying to get into, could be somebody in Bristol that you keep knocking on the door and they keep slamming it shut. Is there anybody there like that, or is there a particular niche? I want to be really specific. I'm going to ask the group for a referral in a minute.
I think it's back to what we said, that the niche is it's marketing communication agencies who would be looking.
So I know that. Are there any particular businesses you'd love to do some work with, but you're not in Bristol?
Because the other side of my targeting would be SMEs with a marketing function within that group. So when I say SMEs, it can be bigger. I mean, I'd like to work with people like the RAC, which I've worked myself. I'd like to work with AXA. I'd like to work with TSB Bank. I'd like to work with Lloyds Bank. But the problem you get is that they mostly have their internal HR people who will do it themselves.
What business, I'm trying to get off you, Mel, and I don't want to go on to SMEs. I want to focus on these agencies. Is there an agency that you really feel that you would like an introduction to?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to my roots. I'd like to go back to McCann's, and there is nobody.
So you don't have any connections any longer at McCann's?
Not any longer, no.
Right.
Well,
okay.
I do at group level in Birmingham. My old boss is still the CEO there.
Right, brilliant. You'll see I'm going to use this. I mean, I have no connections now with the Weller people that were taken over by Procter & Gamble. Let me just tell, in fact, just that's just going to sell 2 minutes to end for everybody. And you see them all coming back in the room. You can see these one-to-ones. People do, if you've got 10 minutes for a one-to, not possible. I mean, I'm the way to do it properly and to tease out those stories. And you've got to tease it out of, I'm talking about referral partners now.
Yeah.
You've got to tease those stories out. You've got to ask meaning questions, even with with your clients anyway, because you're the same business as me. You've got to ask those questions.
I think I said that a lot of the time, they're just looking for the end result. And they'd expect everything else to be right. They expect me to do the interview and the assessment and all the other kind of stuff. And all they're looking for is the right candidate and the right fit.
Do you go back and measure that result or get some feedback?
Yeah, I would, because one of the reasons that I set up this business was because I wanted to communicate with the candidate, because I've been a candidate when I was actually contracting as well, and recruitment agency would contact me, say, "You interested in this?" I'd say yes. I'd never hear from them again, and I would follow up the candidate who started within the first week just to see how it's going.
What's the typical a satisfied client? What's the typical comment from them? How they feel? What would they say?
Ideal appointment, just what we're looking for.
You expand on that. How did they feel? That's
what, the client or the candidate?
No, the client. Well, both.
The client would say, you did all the hard work for us. We didn't have to do anything about the interview. You did all that. You sent us the ideal candidate, and he or she is fitting in with the team, very well. And the candidate would say, it's just the job I've been looking for, and I've been waiting for this opportunity to further my career.
Okay, I would explore those further and tease out some more there. But I've got enough here to be able to sell you to the group or present you to the group. Wow, did you enjoy that?
Yes, yeah, it was great.
Brilliant.
Very good.
Brilliant.
Well, I had to do a quick one on this one because Mel was all on his own. He was on a room on his own. He didn't know me. So, and I was panicking. I thought, how do I join that room? So I eventually invited him back to the main room. So we did ours. We had a great session. Now, who needs to get off at 9? Ewan, right, and Mel. So I'm going to present Mel. He didn't get to know anything about mine, and that's the way I normally like it to begin with. So Ewan, who are you with?
I was with Anne-Marie.
Oh, what a brilliant!
It was a lovely story, I have to say. I'm looking forward to telling it. I just hope I do it justice. If I don't, Anne-Marie, then please, when you tell my story, tell everyone I was crap and that was not exactly what you said.
Well, the beauty of this actually is that you're going to get your story told by somebody else, and that is always more powerful. I always used to say, you can tell people how good you are all day long, but when somebody else tells other people how good you are, that is powerful. So, Ewan, who's going to go first, ladies or men?
Well, I'll go first, as I say, because I got to shoot out in 10 minutes.
All right.
So, I will tell you the toilet brush story. So, Anne-Marie has had challenges throughout her life, and we were talking about being children in the 70s and 80s, and things like mental health issues and various other things didn't exist those times. You just got on with it. Bullying didn't exist. That was just it. And then coming into adult life, so basically, sorry, let me go back. When, as an escape, Anne-Marie used to love reading and used to love writing. But interestingly, Anne-Marie would always read the start of a book. And if she liked it, she would then get into it. And then she would go, hang on, I just want to make sure this has a happy ending or a good ending. I think it was probably a happy ending. So she would then read the end of the book. And if the end of the book was good, she'd then go, right, I'll read the middle. So that was, I thought that was quite an interesting way of looking at things. As Anne-Marie went into adult life, she had a young son, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, unfortunately, her son is disabled. So she's had to work part-time to provide for herself and her son for years, doing basically anything. I think the word that Anne-Marie was used was, I think I've cleaned everything that you could possibly clean. But whilst doing this, she was still learning, and developing her writing, and realized that through, whether it was at this time or subsequently, by sharing her writings with other people, notably editors, that people actually said, no, you can write, you can write. And the toilet brush moment actually comes down to when Anne-Marie was doing one of her jobs, one of her cleaning jobs. She was cleaning an office block, I think it was. And Anne-Marie has a successful sister who works in occupational health in the National Health Service. And one day, Anne-Marie's up to her elbows in J-cloths and rubber gloves and cleaning. And Anne-Marie gets a phone call. And her sister apparently is very successful, and her sister's always been very driven and always known exactly what she wants. And on the end of the line was her sister, and her sister said, I've just spoken to the PM and I'm going to be on TV this afternoon. And it's at that point Anne-Marie turned into her left hand and noticed the toilet brush in her left hand and thought, enough of this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm better than this. And by better, I think we discussed the fact it wasn't I'm better than people who clean toilets. It was I'm not fulfilling my potential. I can be better than this. When we were talking, I think there's a little bit of a gap, which is my fault for not interviewing, but I'm guessing what happened then, and a nod will shake your head, Anne-Marie, is that you then went into a bit of corporate life, obviously allowing that your son was probably a bit older, I guess, so things were a bit easier. But you had a pretty miserable time coming up to the end of last year or October last year, when basically there was a contretemps between you and your manager, and that was it. Your manager had basically been having you under the thumb for so long that you then thought, this is it. I know I can do writing, and this is the time for me to do it.
Okay, Ewan, thank you very much for that. That is quite a compelling story about her. I know you might need to get off. I just want to do Mel's now, and then you'll have to tune into the recording to hear what Anne-Marie says about you. Don't know how everybody else has done that, and I'm quite happy that you tell those stories in that way. Maybe I didn't explain what I wanted to tease out because we've got a referral. You know, this is about telling the story to others that might get them business as well. But that story would, you know, if you massage that story, it says where that passion comes from. You know?
Yeah, but I think that's the next part of the story. But you need the background to get to that.
Yeah, and the only challenge we've got on here is I want to hear everybody's story. So we're going to do these fairly quickly. Within 2 minutes, I'm going to do these.
I didn't know if. Yeah, I
didn't say that either. So it's my fault entirely. I want to tell you about Mel Burton. He's got a fascinating story about the way he works. First of all, he has a recruitment agency out of experience to marketing, creative agencies, digital agencies, and he helps place the right people first time rightly. The sort of size of businesses that he looks for are people with a fair number of individuals, whereby the person responsible for that recruitment process would be quite overwhelmed. They're going to outsource that talent. Recently, he's been working on, he's been telling me, he's been working on a marketing communications agency that's got 118 offices in 25 countries, sizable one. He's serving them. Now, he's not serving internationally. They've got 10 offices in the UK, and he's working with the Cirencester office. The person he's dealing with is HR. So if you know agencies of that size, it won't be the marketing director, and it won't be the brand manager at the first stage, whose team they might work in, depending on what the position is. It will be the HR people. So he has a good relationships with HR people. And the reason he's got that is he's had 40 years experience in this industry. He's hired people himself, and he was telling me about the challenges he once had, where he hired an individual who looked well at the time of the interview, but 2 weeks in, he realized that the chemistry he showed and sold himself at the interview wasn't the chemistry with the other people. He was not a team player. there was a bad chemistry, and they had to get rid of him. And that's a common mistake. He tells me that 40% of hires in this industry realize within 2 weeks they've hired the wrong person. That's a real challenge. I teased out of him, took me a while, to say and the other thing that people say when they've worked with him is that Mel and his company do the heavy lifting of interviewing. Anybody's been doing any interviewing, you know it's an arduous, stressful business. He does the heavy lifting because he knows how to. And a good introduction for him in the Bristol area, if anybody knows anybody from McCann Erickson in Bristol, which he used to be MD of, but of course he no longer needs anybody. Are you nodding there, Marcus?
No, I'm nodding in amazement, Paul.
All right.
Where's the timer? You've done more than 2 minutes. Come on, hurry up.
Right. So that's it. So that's how you can help. But I tell you, after talking to him, I'd recommend. If I've got any agency of that size, he's the man I would recommend. Bang. Okay. Who wants to go next? See, I tell that better than Mel tells it. But go on.
I think you get too close to it yourself.
Yeah. Right. I want to hear the stories of Angela and Vivian. So, and Debbie. So who was with Angela? Ollie, right.
That's me. Cool.
Tell us about Angela.
Yeah, that's hard to follow you though, Paul, because you're obviously a pro at this.
I would have gone last. It's only because Mel's got to go.
Cool. So yeah, basically I'm going to start this by saying that every business needs Angela. Whatever kind of size they are, I think their businesses can only grow and develop with Angela's skills. So Angela is multifaceted. So she is a business mentor, a motivational speaker, and also does healing as well. So angelic healing and Reiki healing. And she integrates this all together to kind of provide holistic kind of business mentorship and leadership. So from her background as a mechanical engineer and process improvement specialist, Angela realized that businesses could have all of these wonderful processes in place that they could have to try and change their businesses, create growth. But if there was an issue with the leadership or management that for some reason they just weren't capable of doing it from their own kind of technical skills as themselves, not just the business skills, those changes couldn't happen in the business, the growth couldn't happen, and there was no kind of change. So Angela realized that her skills could come in and she could talk and mentor the business leaders, so the management, and give them the right kind of skills and techniques to be able to fully kind of embrace and understand the process changes that need to be made in the business. And her unique thing is that she combines her work as a sort of an energy healer with the business mentorship. So she will use sort of angelic and divine messages alongside her business mentorship skills. So it's this brilliant holistic approach to kind of business mentorship and leadership.
Good shot there, Ollie. Good shot. By the way, if you've not been in one of these sessions before, you know I tend to give feedback. I think you struggled a little bit there because it's the first time you've done it. You got a little bit technical, and the second half that I leaned in at the holistic bit, etc. But all of those processes, I got a little bit lost, and people can. And what I've written down here, I've written technical, and I've written give us an example, tell us a story of an example of how she's helped a business. You probably didn't cover that, but when you get used to doing this, you'll tease that out of them, because a little story, a practical story of how she's done that would be very, very useful. I'll come back to Angela because I want to hear hidden things about Ollie. Where are we? Who was with Vivian? Marcus, what a great connection. Two of my favorite people. Marcus, tell us about Vivian.
I'll call you Simpson. Vivian Simpson, what a lovely name, but more importantly, what a lovely voice. And it's important because Vivian is a telemarketer. a rare beast these days, you might think, but a beast who can really help you get work. She's just been working with Shell. They've been rolling out a program in the UK over the last 15 months, helping businesses save money. The way they do this is they've got vans that will go to your business and fill up your vehicles overnight with different fuels, so you don't need to go to the forecourt. And that means the van is ready to go out in the morning. So that saves money. It also saves money because, believe it or not, fraud. Apparently, some of these people have been using their business cards to go around to garages and buying things like, well, you can imagine, Coke, bottles of Coke, even worse. Anyway, I'll leave that to your imagination. So that's what Vivian does. And she's so good at it that Shell have now rolled out that idea and that notion of contacting businesses nationwide across the country. So if you're looking for somebody to sell your business on the phone, Vivian Simpson is the person to do it.
That was very good. You told that very well. There's only one thing at the end. Anybody spot what he did at the end?
Yes, I know what I did. I said you.
Correct. In other words, that is the bit. So what would be a better ending is to find out who Vivian wants an introduction to, either by business category or an individual, like I did with Mel asking for McCann Erickson. That would have been absolutely an end perfect. I can tell you being trained at BNI.
Can I just say one thing? I wasn't aware of how long I was going to be able to speak to Marcus, and I probably hogged the telephone conversation somewhat. I am sorry, Marcus, but we've arranged that I'm going to get in touch with him anyway so I can hear more of his story.
I said to Mel that the time that we had wasn't really enough. You've got to. I would suggest you go back with your partner and develop the conversation.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. And I can attest to Vivian because she's the number one telemarketer person that I recommend people to. And if you've got businesses that need to penetrate a particular market and they want to do it on the telephone and sort that market, qualify that market, she's excellent at it. And we know the importance of companies that need to follow up with clients, how did we do? Also, that's a great area, but she'd also tell you other areas as well. Now, who is with Debbie? Martin, do you want to tell us about Debbie?
Yeah. Hi, I'm going to talk about Debbie and the intertwining of two of her loves in her life. Debbie is an amazing singer. She's worked in London, singing across many styles. She now runs a wedding band and performs at events and weddings in country and western. But do you know what? It's not always been the case for Debbie. She wasn't a natural performer. And when she was young, her mother used to take her into the toilet where she used to throw up before performing. Now, her mother was a hypnotherapist, and she used these techniques to develop Debbie's skill at performing and make her less nervous. And so now, as Debbie's retrained as a hypnotherapist, she feels that she wants to help performers, whether they're young performers going to an exam or people in bands that feel very nervous about performing. She wants to combine these two loves, and she feels she's in a very strong position to do that. So that's Debbie.
Martin, that was really good. And I'll tell you why I say that, because I know Debbie's a singer, etc. I know she's doing Reiki and reflexology or whatever. Pardon me, I haven't got those. I know you're in that holistic arena. And my first reaction was that, was that just, is she like everybody else, is it a sideline? You've put the story behind why she's in there, why she developed that interest, what got her involved in that. And it showed her vulnerability. You're showing the vulnerability by the fact that she used to throw up, So anybody that has been there said, oh, right, she's not a superstar. She is just like me. So sometimes when you tell your story, it's quite important. And I think Anne-Marie mentioned this last week. to give you vulnerability. I'm going to want to listen to Angela now. Did you get a chance to talk about Ollie or find out about Ollie, Angela?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us?
I haven't got an exact story because obviously I needed to find out a lot. I've never met anyone here, but yes, I found out about Ollie and what he does and his website business. So Ollie works with sole traders, small businesses and startups. And from the outset, it's very clear because this is all he's wanted to do from school. So his passion for problem solving and creativity, combined with the geek of the developing, came through really, really strongly. So I think his unique skill that came across to me was his connection with individuals. So he takes time to find out not just about the connection with the business and the individual, but a common interest. So he's kind of getting inside their head and really learning about them before he helps them develop and create their business. So the really nice thing was working with startups and making their idea become reality and actually bring it into fruition. So that's what I really sort of loved, the bit about taking the headache and the technical problems and the maintenance of a website away from, someone who's just starting out and bringing their idea into fruition. So we didn't really get a story about a client, but the passion came through.
That's excellent. Just a quick one, Angela. What did you particularly like about Ollie?
About the fact that he's very personal and he's just very enthusiastic and passionate about what he does.
Great. Great.
The transformation in startups is what I was interested in.
Martin, what impressed you about Debbie at first reaction? Microphone. I can't hear
you. Sorry. She's honest and fun, and she comes across as very personable, like a warm and sort of interested in what you're saying. Yeah, that was.
So although there's been we've all got different structures to this, how somebody relates to somebody else and the feeling they're left with about that person, that trust, their like, etc., or not, is very important in the way you're going to tell the stories to other people. I'm going to I'll come to Andy in a minute, but I want to, Chris has been so up to his eyes in it, and I always love listening to Chris tell stories. Who were you with, Chris?
I was with Andrew.
Do you want to tell us about Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, everyone has spent time with Andrew, so they'll know how fabulous he is. Andrew is a website designer, as we know. He's intrinsically interested in design and technology. So his aim is to immerse himself in things that he loves, that he likes the detail from, in order to build stories and get rapport with his clientele, because he's driven by relationships. Andrew was talking about a lady who runs a dog boarding place today, and saying that often she meets dogs when they're puppies, and then may not see them again for a year or two. And when their owners go on holiday, she already feels that she has a relationship with that animal. So when dogs come back to her, they're visiting Auntie Jo, or whatever her name is. So that it's like it's a visit to Auntie rather than a dog boarding thing. And what came across from Andrew is how much he was invested in that story, and how much he was invested in carrying that story forward for that client. So he was feeling the flavour of it himself. He was jumping in with both feet. My own experience with Andrew is that he's articulate, on point, madly enthusiastic, and completely flat out all the time, which is fabulous. I'm really pleased he's busy. So
great. Thank you, Chris. And I didn't realise, I didn't spot in the sort of pressure that you were two together, but because I know that you're a client of Andrew, so I would have got you with somebody else. But you did that very well. That was a good picture of Andrew, which anybody that's been on for any length of time would concur with. Who is with Helen? They've gone, have they? Who are you with, Helen?
Yeah, I was with Rebecca, but she had to go.
Right.
Sorry.
Can you tell us about Rebecca?
Yeah. I found Rebecca to be quite a multifaceted person. She has a depth of knowledge in the people that she works with as a photographer. She's done a lot of documentary photography and then decided to combine both to become an architectural photographer, which I found slightly confusing at the time. But once she'd explained herself, it made perfect sense. She came across as being very warm and interested in people. She loves her work. She loves teasing stories out of people to bring projects to fruition. So as a architectural photographer, in approaching the clients, if she's working on an old building, she will always try and incorporate the story of the building, going back on the history of it, what the use of the building was, the love of the building, why it was there in the first place, and then trying to build that into a present day building. She wants that story to be carried forward. So if an old factory is being turned into homes, that each resident in that building would then know what they were there and why they were there and why they purchased it and that they wanted to purchase the building. If it's a new building, she talks about people who are going to be in it and why they should be there. The thing I found a bit contradictory in what she was saying is that when we had a quick look at her website, I felt she was still battling to portray what she is about. She talks about sustainability, a place for people, highlighting the obstacles, etc., etc. So I felt she needed to put more case studies on the website. That's about it, really. Great,
thank you, Helen. I like that story about what's resonated out of myself. There is she tells she shares the personality of the building. I mean, how close a relationship can you get for an architectural photographer to fall in love with the personality of the building? That could be some good copy. Behind me in South Horrington is the Gilbert Scott produced it. It's the old Bath and Wells Pauper Asylum, and Marcus is chatting because his mouth dropped open when he saw it. What's it like?
No, it's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely cool. I mean, can you believe that? Something all the history of that place.
Yeah.
Now what they turn it into is very nice.
And in fact, if you're around Wells before the end of the month, check on the opening times. The museum there has got an exhibition about the history of that. So I love that bit that Helen's just said there. I've never heard it from Rebecca, that incorporating the personality of the building. Absolutely fabulous. Good. Let's listen. Let's hear about Andy. Who are you with, Andy?
Nick Cole.
Nick, do you want to tell us about Andy? Big him up. Sure. Really big him up. He needs the business. Cars are in demand now. We're able to travel at least around the lanes. Go on.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Andy. I've known Andy for a while, and I must say it's only recently I've really got to know Andy a little bit better. I got the opportunity to meet him face to face. And Andy's had a journey in the car industry for all of his career. He started off as a mechanic, the spanners as he called it, and he kind of moved into a sales role, and that's where Andy really excelled. And I think the reason he excelled is he's not a traditional salesman. We've all got this image, haven't we, of a car salesman who's going to sell you a dodgy car and it's going to break down in a couple of weeks. where Andy wants to position himself and where he does is he spends the time to get to know his clients. He talks to them, he listens to them, and he won't sell them the car if it's not the right car for them. So, he wants that client to come back to him. And now he's actually seeing his clients come back to him. So they're coming to the end currently of their 3-year lease. They now need a new car. Are they going to go back to Andy, or are they going to go somewhere else? And if he's looked after them, they're going to come back. So I think, what Andy's brilliant at is thinking about his clients and thinking about the long term. And if he looks after them, they will come back to him because they trust him and they believe in him. And he's not a typical car salesman.
Great. That's very good, Nick. So I read into that in the marketing strategy, retention, because you're on a 3-year, rolling, or a 3-year repeat purchase, retention is as much about your strategy as anything else. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, very much so, Paul. It is a long game that I play, but it pays dividends if you do the right things. People don't look externally again; they come back and give you the opportunity.
Yeah. It'd be good to tease out you if you decide to join us long term. It'd be good to tease out of you. This is a selling pitch here. No, it'd be good to tease out with you, even on a one-to-one, what retention strategies you use, what little techniques, because I think, so that's the sort of thing that we share. I'd love to hear the master storyteller tell us about who you were with Ewan. And so we go back to Anne-Marie. And what do you think of Ewan, really? He's not here. You can talk about him behind his back.
I think he's an arrogant so-and-so, and I would never work with him.
Quite the opposite, isn't it? Quite the opposite.
No. So Ewan, what I really, and I don't know Ewan very well at all, and what I really identified with was his why he's doing what he does. And it comes from his love of animals and animal conservation, which I had no idea about. And he went on a trip to Thailand in 2015. At the time, he was working for a couple of wildlife charities. And he went to the Tiger Temple, which is where apparently they used to torture tigers to make them perform better, etc., etc. On his return, he was told that the 2 agencies he was working with were in conflict and they had to drop one of them, and he didn't want to do that. So the Care for the Wild International, I think I've got that right, basically said, we will give you all of our marketing budget, go freelance, because we really rate how passionate you are about, the work that you do. So in 2015, 2016, that's when he went self-employed and started working freelance, continued to campaign, and this Tiger Temple is now no longer. And the tigers have all been rehomed and they're all very happy, apparently. And what really struck me about that story was it just kind of summed up his belief in what he does and delivering the right message for the right reason. And he basically said that the people he wants to work with are people that have a genuine story, and a bit like Nick was just saying about Andy, he won't tell somebody's story, or he won't do their marketing if he doesn't believe in them, and he won't sell them the wrong, he won't just kind of sign them up for the sake of ticking a box and saying I've got another customer. They have to have that integrity and that belief, and that for me was really, really powerful. So that's in a nutshell where we got to with Ewan.
I think that's excellent, Anne-Marie, really good. Because if you get a situation where, and as you get to know him better, the sort of business he's looking for, when you spot somebody that where he's helped you find that person in your visibility, you don't need to explain to anybody what he does. All you've got to do is to sell the idea that they should talk to him. He's the best to tell you how he can help you. But I tell you what I like about Ewan, and then you tell that story. That's very powerful. It's a very powerful way of introducing somebody to somebody else. Martin, you were with Debbie, and then I'm going to have to end it there to sort of wrap up. And it's nice to see Rod back. Debbie, were you able to get round to Martin?
Yes, we did talk about him. Yes. So Martin has been a graphic designer for over 30 years now. He's a very creative individual. His first job was at the EMI. He co-owned a graphic design company in London. He's worked with some huge clients, obviously EMI, as well as the Hayward Gallery as well. But after many years of living the high life in London, he and his family decided that there are more important things in life than living in London and the high life. And they moved away. They tried a couple of places and settled in Bristol just recently. It's such a creative city. And if anything, he refound his love for his job, and he finds his passion is there still. He's found now that although obviously he's worked with many corporate companies and so on, I think the family life in him and his love of individuality and bringing people together and so really wanting to understand people as opposed to the company has made it so that he now wants to work and does work with smaller companies. He works with a lot of charities, with schools, with companies such as local bakeries and so on, where rather than, just like being another person in the company, he really wants to, I suppose, bring what they believe and what they want to show out in the work that he does for them. So it's almost as though he's, rather than just another cog in the wheel, I suppose he's part of the company. He sort of almost guides them along in a way that, so he understands them so that he gets the best out of the company in his graphic design work. So that's basically what he does now, and he's found that it's a wonderful way to live his life. He loves it.
What was your overall impression of Martin in just one sentence?
Very passionate about the work he does, and kind of a family man, I think, more so than he doesn't want to be, this is more than a sentence, it's got lots of commas in, more than, he doesn't want to work in the big companies. He wants to work with individuals, I suppose, and stuff that means a lot to him and to them. I think he's personable in that respect.
Good. I would certainly trust Martin. I think sometimes when we're on these networking events, we've got different personalities, and you get to know Rod, and I'm not allowing him to speak, you'll realize he's a larger than life character, and there's certain things. But in dealing with lots of people for a long time, there are certain other people where it's a little bit more, they're not quite as comfortable, or they're more relaxed, or they're quieter. It's the quiet ones that are normally the most interesting as you tease those out. And I think Ewan would fit into that bill. He's quiet, he doesn't over promote himself. They're the people you sort of lean into as well. So, and I always feel that Martin is that sort of person. So one of his graphics on LinkedIn this week, I knew it was done professionally, but a lot of us share sort of stuff. But he produced that, and I was taken away by that. And I wanted to know Anne-Marie's experience behind the bike shed, but another day. Now, because she told a story about that, I think Rod must have missed that one. Now, I'm going to go around and ask everybody one thing they've got from today's meeting. But before I do that, I will say there is another story. I said there was a third story, and this might be the subject. I think somebody's asked for this. What are the stories we tell ourselves of who we are? The thing that stops a lot of people for being more, for doing more, are the stories we tell ourselves about who we think we are. Would you agree? So that might be a fascinating subject. I like to tease that and encourage people to reach out beyond where they think they can get to. And I've got a couple of ideas to continue this story theme for the next couple of weeks, and I'll tell you that at the end. So if I can just go around the room in no particular order, we're starting at the top left, actually. Martin, just one thing you got from today's meeting.
Yeah, what I got was it was great to get to know Debbie and learn more about her, and just the whole interest of storytelling. It's like, if it's honed, I think it can be really good, really powerful.
Yeah. But you enjoyed the session?
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Good. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, same as Martin, actually, just being able to have the opportunity to get to know Ewan. And I really saw a facet of him that I didn't appreciate was there. So that was really good.
I must admit, I sometimes have wondered whether we ought to have a regular session, like a referral session, like a mini one-to-one, to get to know each other, but maybe tease out how we can then ask the rest of the group for an introduction for that person. I didn't want to go. I mean, that could be a session occasionally for that, but thanks for that, Anne-Marie. Debbie, you're in your second visit, and I know we've communicated you like to be part of the group, but you're trying to time when you do that. But Debbie, what do you get from today?
Like last week, it's so interesting. I love hearing about other people's stories. It was lovely to meet Martin properly. I find it very interesting. I like to hear people's stories and how people communicate, and learning about how to do stories as well, because that's something that I've never really thought I'm very good at. So it's very interesting to learn.
We're all pretty good at stories. When we meet people for coffee, whether it's girlfriends, boyfriends, whether it's husbands, wives, etc., we come back and tell people the story of our day. It's just about funneling into marketing. Andy, did you get anything from this from a marketing point of view, areas in which you might be able to beef up stories, or what? Or are you just
Yeah, definitely, Paul. One that Nick eked out at me is really sharing a lot more of my client stories from the beginning to where they're at in their journeys now. And that is a simple way to, obviously, for people to visualize how working with me is. And they can see, obviously, where I add value. So, yeah, so definitely a lot of food for thought there.
Good. Thanks, Andy. Ollie, what about you?
Yeah, firstly, obviously great to meet Angela, and gives me hope that people like her are working with businesses. I think is really, really cool. The big thing I think for me was I've kind of started to grasp this whole story in business a bit more now. I struggled a bit last week, and I think this week was really the importance of giving an example, and that's obviously something I missed out on talking about. But I think that's been really important takeaway for me, and also sort of that vulnerability as well. When I look back or think back to other people talking about the other people, the stories that have really stuck out are the one, about Ewan and the Tigers, and then the one about Debbie and, overcoming her kind of anxiety and things with singing and how she's introduced that in her work. So I think, the vulnerability bit as well is really kind of stuck in my head from it all.
Very powerful, because you're connecting then, because believe it or not, we're all vulnerable at some point. We've all doubted ourselves. We've all been frightened of moving forward. Nick.
Yeah, another great session. And it's been great to hear all the different journeys that we've all been on that have kind of got us to where we are today. I think we're all, our journeys are our story, aren't they? And that's what makes us different. And it's probably why none of us are in corporate land and why we're running our own businesses. And like Ollie, I think that whole piece around vulnerability. I know Andy, when I first met him in the real world, he shared something with me that was quite private and quite vulnerable about his health, and that was really appreciated. And I think it's great when you start to build those relationships when people share their journey and their story with you. So yeah, thanks everyone. Cheers.
If you see my story, if anyone wants my story and that link to that video, the first thing I tell people about is 3 years ago I had a triple heart bypass. So that's a bit of vulnerability that was deliberately put in there as to why I'm involved in this project for better health. Angela, your first time. I hope we haven't put you off and you're encouraged to come back. What in particular did you like about the format or the subject in particular?
Yeah, I like the mix. I like the fact that it was really practical, but also really engaging. I was really interested in, as everyone told their story, I was watching individuals and what captured different people. Do you know, as the stories were told, a bit like the tigers, obviously my passion is saving tigers, so that captured my attention, but how everybody linked and you know, reacted to different stories, so that always intrigues me. And I love the fact what it gave me is confidence is with Ollie. I've never met Ollie. My clients say everyone needs an Angela, and I've never heard anybody say it that I've just met, so that was lovely. Thank you, Ollie.
Now, one of the things we've done previously, but I'll drop it in now, if ever you hear anything like that, you just need to use the words, Ollie, can I quote you on that? Can she quote you on that?
Absolutely, yep.
Right. So all you now need to do is to put on your website, ask for permission for that, on your website, everyone needs an Angela, Ollie Cunningham. Agency. Right? Vivian, we've known each other for years. Our trip to the Apple store, which was most unsuccessful. I was hoping to see your new apartment and have a coffee, get some free parking, but never mind. Vivian, what did you think? It took you ages to come on this site. I'm most disappointed this meeting. How was it for you?
Well, it's a very interesting experience because this is a very different format to what I've ever come across before. And it certainly showed the power of stories when it's told by someone else. You know, it has a different slant and obviously has a huge credibility. I am contacting Marcus, bless him. He listened to me, and none of us, or neither of us, realised how the time was running on. So, yeah, a very powerful way of people meeting each other. To have that one-on-one in meeting rooms is something that I said I've not come across before. Great meeting. Thank you, Paul.
Even better when I can press the right buttons at the right time. Andrew.
Yes, to sign off. Yeah, great meeting as usual. Really interesting to really echoing what Vivian's just said, to be honest. Other people telling your stories, incredibly powerful stuff. And I've had clients say different things to me, and I don't say, can I quote you on that? And I really should. So, no, really, really fascinating meeting. Thank you.
A tip for in your other networks, when you're dealing with your referral partners and you're developing that, and they're the people most likely to be able to, they're sharing the same audience, you do need to teach them about what story to tell and how you will be introduced. Then you're really getting it to a fine art. Chris.
I've really enjoyed today. It was actually really nice to be on the phone and be able to wander around outside and still take part in the conversation. As a change of scene, I'll do that again. That made it. It meant I was concentrating more on the words than the pictures. I'm still working on the challenges for me that I love stories. I love getting stories from people. I'm not always good at sharing my own stories out. And it's something I'm working on at the moment. Angela and I have got a session today about posting on social media to get me to engage with that more often. So I think this is a good catalyst towards that. I also want to say thank you to Ollie, who recommended the Do books. Last week I've ordered 2. I'm still waiting for the story one to come through, but I ordered it straight away off the back of his recommendation last week.
That's great. Thank you, Marcus.
Oh, can I go slightly off piste, if I may, Paul, and do a eulogy that has just come into my head for Rod?
Oh, let's see him lean forward then.
Rod has had 10 children. He loves life, but he also loves death. I don't know if I'd say that.
Rod,
and also referrals, amazing. Debbie, Marcus, wedding bands, we got to talk.
Yeah. Now, for those that do want to talk together, we have a membership site where everything's ever recorded. And it must be days of recordings of back things that we're talking about that people can access as a member. Secondly, there's a community there where people connect with one another. If anybody who's not a member is visiting the first time, and it's not pitched to whether you want to be a member, if you want to connect, for instance, Angela, it'd be great for you to connect with Ewan I'll just ping me back when I follow up with an email with you, and I'll be pleased to give you his details, etc. And anybody else that you want to connect with, if that's all right with everybody. Finally, I'm going to say that I've got two things in mind with this story. First of all, the branding stories, and the way that I was thinking that maybe Ewan, who is a branding specialist, and Marcus, who's a branding and fashion photographer, you can get together. I would have asked you in advance, but get together. And maybe like Anne-Marie and Nick, give us a session on branding and photography in the branding process. How you use branding to tell your story, which is the purpose of that. And Nathan's not on today. I'd like to do a session with him on the use of video in your marketing and branding, the use of video in your marketing, where you can use it. It's something I do a lot of. He's an expert at BBC level, and I'm going to try and offline, I'll get in touch with him and see if he will be able to do a session, the two of us. Would that be interesting for all of us? You know,
definitely, yeah.
Because
definitely.
frankly, you don't need a big camera. There's amazing things you can do with that to tell your story and build your marketing. Finally, I don't want to leave you out altogether. Was it a successful trip, Rod?
Job done, all sorted.